Stubborn after the sky.
Hey guys, my name is Grim, and today I am going to show you the build that I've been using for the last couple days, if not maybe a couple weeks, into the last part of the Greymoor patch here. I've been trying out just about everything that you can imagine, and I found one setup that I like ever so slightly more than the Eternal Vigor setup. I just feel like it's a little bit more stat efficient. It definitely has some concessions. It is less new player friendly. You have to work around it a little bit more, but it still has a ton of flexibility. You can mix things up and still be perfectly fine. And I feel like this is a setup that has a much higher potential. So here we go. Let's just hop into it. I want to make this one much quicker than they usually are. So basically, I wanted to get more damage than I was getting while still remaining high on sustain. I wanted to have a similar amount of sustain without over sustaining in areas like I felt I was over sustaining in. So I wanted to keep using Artaeum but get more damage. So what I ended up doing is, to get that damage, I put stuns on the front bar. I have 3 stuns jewelry and then 1 front bar, so I get all 5 pieces on the front bar and 3 pieces on the back bar. So what this does for me is, well, basically it just adds a lot of damage through penetration. And it's pretty easy to get because you only have to deal damage to an enemy who's off balance. So I readjusted my CP so that I am getting off balance through Tactician. And then I'm also getting off balance passively through surprise attack when I attack someone from the rear. And what's nice about this, which some people don't seem to realize, is that it sets your opponent off balance even if they block it. So even if the stun doesn't go out, the off balance status effect still will, and you'll still be able to proc stuns that way. So stuns for damage, but the thing I've always hated about stuns is that it doesn't help my healing at all. And that's where this other change comes in. Normally, I would run New Moon on the front bar because on the back bar, New Moon is adding a 5% cost increase to a sustainability, 2 expensive Magicka abilities, my most expensive stam ability, I'm pretty sure. No, Rally's a little bit more, but Vigor now costs a lot more. And then Venom Arrow, which is my spammable, now costs more. So I'm like getting a lot of added costs on the back bar without really benefiting. Only one skill benefits from the damage increase. I mean, I guess Venom Arrow technically benefits, but it's such a small tooltip that you hardly notice it. It's negligible. Vigor actually gets buffed a lot, though, and that's why I've done it. So I'm running New Moon on both bars in order to get a bigger Vigor tooltip. And so basically I'm getting another 450 damage on Vigor, which is compensating for the healing that I've lost by putting stuns on my, by wearing stuns. And in order to compensate for that, I'm actually using a Try Recovery Glyph. And this is kind of replacing Eternal Vigor in a way. I've given up some damage here, but it's offset by what I've gained via stuns. I've lost a little bit of health recovery compared to my last build. I've lost a little bit of stamina and magica recovery as well, and really it's a lot. But I'm getting the health recovery all the time now, which is nice. So it's helpful even if I'm at like 55% health in Cloak, I'm still getting that nice health recovery. And I get so much more damage that my healing is substantially bigger, right? To pair along with that, I'm using a Perfected Master Bow on the back bar and Balorg head and shoulders. I currently believe I have 3 impen and 4 well fitted, which is actually kind of what I want, I think. Yeah, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, okay. So 4 and 3, and that's pretty good. I feel like you might even be able to go less impen and use 1 sturdy or something. One thing that is true is that you're going to end up blocking a lot, but that's okay because stam recovery is actually pretty high. I'm getting 23-29 with just minor endurance, so that goes up pretty substantially if you've got continuous attack. And so overall, really well balanced build, and you can play around with it a little bit. So the biggest weakness of this setup is that I have really low max stats. You can address this in 2 ways. You can run all healthy or all robust jewelry, or you can run all triune as well if you want both of those stats up. I would recommend that unless you want a lot of health, running triune is more efficient. Like you could do 2 triune and then 1 infused, and that would work pretty well too. If you feel like, you're newer and you're not able to sustain really well, you can actually put 2 Try Recovery Glyphs. You can also play around with your Mundus a little bit. Right now, I'm using the Serpent. You could put on the Warrior and then put on 2 Try Recovery Glyphs, so you have more magical recovery if you want, and you're only losing a very small amount of stam recovery. So there are a lot of ways to play around with it. I mean, the short answer is if you need more recovery, you can build it in via Jewelry and Mundus, and if you need more max stat, you can build it in via Jewelry trait. It kind of sucks that you have to craft the jewelry yourself. That can be expensive. But the upside of that is that you can make it whatever trait you want without having to retrade everything. So that's convenient too. Now, Balorg, still the best choice. Really good damage, and it's up when you burst, which is important. And then I think it's worth mentioning my poison as well. I used these escapist poisons, which immobilize targets, give you unstoppable. So it's technically my only snare immunity. But I don't use that much anyway, so it doesn't really matter. And then it also inflicts hindrance, which slows enemy movement speed by 40%, which is really nice. It's a big deal. It's a nasty snare, and it doesn't really have an animation, so people think that they're lagging or stunned, and you'll just see them sitting here bashing, trying to break free. So it's pretty silly. I like them a lot. I technically actually run a Berserker Glyph, so the increased weapon and spell damage on both my bow and my 2H, and I'll actually just move around the poison. Usually I'll use Minor Fracture or Maim poisons on the front bar, or Minor Brutality, and then I'll use Escapist poisons in the back bar. Those are my kind of go-tos. For potions, I'm using Tripots, and then like I said, for food, I am using Artaeum Takeaway Broth. It's a little expensive. I feel like if you're not going to use Artaeum and you're going to try and use Dubious, I would suggest instead simply using like not this basically. I mean, instead, let's see, you could use Lava Foot. Lava Foot would be a better option than Dubious just because it's so much more stat efficient. And then you can build in those stats for health either via attribute points or potentially by changing around traits here, or even by changing your Mundus if you wanted. So there are just so many options when it comes to shuffling stats around as needed. And so it's a really flexible build for that reason. But what it means is that if you're a new player and you only want to have one build, you can run this exact setup and then kind of wean yourself off recovery. So you can start with 2 tri-recovery glyphs in the Serpent and whatever, and you'll just have tons of recovery. Or you could start with extra health, or, you know, instead of running infused weapon damage, you could run triune weapon damage and you'd be good to go. And that would work really well. And then as you feel more and more comfortable, you can actually just tone that back and add in more damage and subtract out sustain and max stat for more damage. And that'll end up being giving you higher damage potential at the cost of survivability. But as you get better and are better at maintaining your resources and avoiding burst and knowing when to pull out of fights and evade and whatever, that becomes easier and easier. So it's a build with a ton of flexibility, and it'll still be pretty good next patch from what we've seen, because the changes that have been proposed so far only encourage stat builds over proc builds in a lot of ways, namely by giving us increased crit damage in exchange for survivability. So it's very possible next patch that since I'm getting more damage and losing some defense, that I might after all end up making 2 of these jewelry triune. Not sure which ones, haven't really decided yet, but totally possible it'll make 2 triune, and that way I'm getting another line of health and another line of stamina just for some extra survivability there. Next patch, the Serpent is also getting buffed, so I'll probably stick with the Serpent into next patch and run more damage on my jewelry. So I definitely, next patch, would recommend, instead of going 2 tri-recovery glyphs and the warrior, running the Serpent and then putting damage on your jewelry, where you actually get more damage than you would recovery, and then having less tri-recovery glyphs. Even though they're really nice and really efficient, and health recovery is really an awesome thing to get for free, you're going to get more damage out of it. So using the Serpent to get all the stam recovery you need is a really good way of playing it. Remember though, also, if you don't have the perfected Master Bow, you can get the regular Master Bow by running normal DSA, which is super fast. Even teams of new players can do it in under an hour. I haven't been a new player for a long time, so that's not verified. But it should be super duper easy and really painless. And you can get a regular Master Bow, which is only going to be marginally worse. It's like the difference of 100 weapon damage, and you'll be good to go. You're going to lose a little bit on your vigor, and that's it. Also worth noting, people are going to ask me this, so I'm just going to say it. New Moon is getting nerfed next patch. Is from what we've seen, nothing is for certain there, but it looks like it's going to get a nerf. The nerf seems fairly negligible. Like, it's substantial enough that it makes you think, but not so much that I really think that there's a better option available right now. There are alternatives, and for the first time in a long time, they're worth considering over New Moon, but until I've tested them all, I'm really not confident in them. And so I'm going to be sticking with New Moon for the foreseeable future until I've tried out these other setups and can recommend them myself. So one set I'm potentially looking at is Truth, and that would be a little sticky because I'd have to use Truth jewelry, so I have to figure out what traits I want beforehand. But Truth is a good setup. It's also a little bit more stat dense in terms of like max stats, so I'd be, getting a little bit more max stat, which is nice. Another option would be you know what? Actually, there are a lot of options. I don't want to say too many because I may disagree with them in 30 days. So I'll test them out and I'll make another build video and let you know what I find that I actually like. Hopefully this has been helpful. I know this is a lot faster than what I normally go through. Just one more thing I'm going to say, because I see a lot of people asking about this, especially newer players, is like, how can I fit things like ambush on my bar? The reason I don't use abilities isn't always because they're bad, but either because they're really punishable or not as good as the alternatives. So a lot of people will question Executioner. Executioner is just really good. Like, it's really good, and bar swap canceling it can like pull in kills that would otherwise get away, and there are not a lot of amazing alternatives to Executioner. Likewise, people want to find a way to fit in ambush. There's nothing here I would trade for ambush. Ambush is extremely punishable, and good players will kill you while you're ambushing. So it's just not super great. Shuffle is another one I get a lot. I've learned to play without shuffle, without like a consistent snare immunity tool and a snare break. You just have to keep your shade down and play in a really shade conscious way. But shade has higher potential than shuffle does. And it also costs magic instead of stamina, which is a bonus. And then in a 1v1 situation, Minor Maim applies to everyone, where shuffle will only apply to AoE abilities. So that's kind of a no-no. So that's why I like to play this way. And that's kind of just how I operate. And I recommend other people try it at least. I also get the question, Dark Cloak or Shadowy Disguise. Shadowy Disguise is better the more people you're fighting. So since I like to open world in 1vx, Shadowy Disguise is the better option for me. Dark Cloak is better if you're mitigating the damage of 1 or 2 people. And then if you're trying to mitigate the damage of 8 people, Shadowy Disguise is much more efficient. So I've got a whole video on offensive and defensive mechanics and combos. So you should check that out if you have more questions about abilities or the rotation, things like that. I recommend those. Anyways, hope this has been helpful. I'm going to call it here a little bit earlier than usual. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments, and myself or one of my friends or one of the other viewers will answer them. I try to answer everything possible. Yeah, you might say so. I try to answer everything myself, but if I miss it, don't sweat it. Just at me again or join the Discord. And from the Discord, you'll be able to actually at me and ask me any question you want. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.